You know when you need it.
About a year ago, uh, Bishop Ming um, gave us a mandate, gave the chaplains group a mandate, which some of you are aware of because I've spoken to you about it. But it took a year in the development and multiple reviews of the product, and then finally submitting it, excuse me, for a legal review, which was very extensive and very expensive. But we're on the other side now with a completely finished product that Bishop Ming had felt like that the chaplains were the primary group that could handle his vision of developing a crisis intervention program for the entire PCG ministers group. Now, Chaplain Indira has been um, our chaplain for the chaplains. And when there is an issue or something that's in our chaplains' families, Chaplain Indira has been ministering to that need for well over a year now. Chaplain Al-Fadeli, however, was recognized by Bishop Ming and the General Board as the director of pastoral care for PCG ministers. And so she has developed the crisis intervention plan, which again, I've spoken to some of you about it, but not all of you have known the background on this plan. Tonight, we'd like Tammy to give us a briefing on the plan. I have sent, and you should have in your email, the entire, I don't know, there's about 40 pages now or more, the entire plan. And so without further ado, Tammy, if you're ready, I'm going to just ask you to go ahead and brief our group and take us forward.
Yes, Bishop. Thank you, Bishop. Team, Bishop asked if I could provide a brief introduction of the PCG Crisis Intervention Plan. And so that anxiety does not ruffle during this briefing, there are 20 slides and I will be brief. But the intent of this introduction is to summarize the crisis intervention plan for PCG. So we'll briefly cover the purpose, responsibilities, and the expected impact of this program. And so Elder Dell, are you able to? Okay, thank you, sir. If you can do the full screen on the slide, sir, that would be great. Just at the bottom, Bishop Dale. Oh, I'm sorry, not Bishop, Elder Dale. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay. So I want to just thank Bishop Ming and Bishop Reynolds for entrusting this product to me, but I did not do it alone. And I want to thank Chaplain Swift with his eyes and his experience was able to also contribute to this product. Next slide. So let's start with, and Bishop kind of talked about how this came to fruition. It was a mandate from Bishop Ming, and to basically extend the care to PCG ministers and their families during unforeseen circumstances. And part of the plan is to assist those in crisis with navigating through their circumstances, which may often mean referring individuals to helping persons in their communities who have the experience as well as the licensure or whatever they need to provide that care that we may not have. The crisis intervention team includes more than 15 chaplains, and they will assist with with requested interventions to the PCG's 35 districts. And the crisis intervention plan will be disseminated to each district. Next slide. To serve as the PCG Crisis Intervention Chaplain, you must be fully certified and endorsed by PCG. So that means that chaplain candidates at this time do not qualify to provide or to serve as a crisis intervention chaplain, but that might be something that they're interested later when they are fully certified. Also, you must maintain favorable standing with PCG in accordance with PCG bylaws. And the crisis intervention chaplain role is a volunteer role. Next slide. Here are the responsibilities of the crisis intervention chaplain. Each crisis intervention chaplain will be assigned to 2 or more districts. And we worked hard to reach out to those 15 chaplains to pair them up with a district within their current military, hospital, area of operation so that they are able, if necessary, to travel to those locations. But the CICs or crisis intervention chaplains will need to attend quarterly meetings and quarterly training. Also, because of the role, the CICs are restricted to valid credentials that they possess. And so if there is a crisis and a PCG minister or family member needs additional care for which we are not credentialed, and then we must reach out to their communities and find someone who is legally able to provide the care. And so an example of that would be if they need to talk to someone in mental health, maybe a psychologist, or maybe need to see a medical doctor. That's beyond our scope of responsibility. So the crisis intervention chaplain will be responsible for making referrals as needed. Listing our credentials and the crisis intervention plan, it will help each of us to know who has specific credentials. And so, for example, if someone in one of my areas of responsibilities request a counselor of a particular issue, and I do not have that credential, and I know Chaplain Foster may have that credential, then I know I can reach out to him, see if he's available. That also, having those credentials will keep PCG out of legal trouble and will also keep each crisis intervention chaplain out of trouble. But we also, what's most important, we want to make sure that those we're serving receive the care they need in a direct and exponential manner. Also, for legality reasons, we want to make sure PCG is protected, like I just stated, when we provide specialized care, by making sure that those credentials are legitimate. And so and Bishop and I talked about this, and as this plan had gone through the legal review, one of the things that if there's a credential that must be updated annually, we will want to know the last date of that or the most recent update on that credential. Do you want to say more about that, Bishop?
No, you're good.
Okay, yes, sir. And I think that's all I want to say about this slide. Oh, okay, thank you. One of the most important or the most important parts of this plan is the confidentiality policy. And I say most important only because most of the crisis intervention chaplains are military chaplains, and this confidentiality policy is different than our 100% confidentiality policy of the military. So here's the confidentiality policy, which will be read verbatim. And so I'm going to read this, if that's okay. So confidentiality during and after crisis intervention is paramount. Confidentiality guidelines for individuals who are military, hospital, prison chaplains, or other vocational chaplains are not necessarily parallel to confidentiality guidelines for the Pentecostal Church of God crisis intervention um, director, crisis intervention chaplains, district leaders, and pastors. As more fully described in the Pentecostal Church of God Crisis Intervention Plan, CICs are required to keep all confidential information private and not disclose it to any third party without the express written consent of the individuals involved, except as required by law. For example, mandatory reporting obligations for abuse, threats of harm, or complying with court orders or subpoenas. And that may be different per state. CICs are responsible for understanding and complying with policies and procedures in the CIP, which is Crisis Intervention Plan, and for familiarizing themselves with and adhering to the mandatory reporting laws of the states and their assigned districts. Individuals in crisis will be informed about the confidentiality limitations in the CIP. Beyond the exceptions to confidentiality, CICs will only discuss details of crisis with PCG staff who may need to know facts with the intention of providing additional assistance. Now, it may be appropriate to take questions on this confidentiality policy, if that's okay, Bishop, if there are any
Certainly.
questions. Are there any questions?
There is a reference in the back for all of the different states and all of the different reporting requirements for every state. So there, if a crisis intervention chaplain has a question regarding their specific area, it should be covered in that annex in the back.
Yes, sir.
So I have a question. It's my understanding that the CICs for the districts have already been chosen and assigned.
So the answer to that question is it's a work in progress.
Okay.
So what we have, what the group has done so far is make initial thoughts about who they felt like would be joined to specific districts. It's not been written in stone as of yet, and this meeting tonight is part of that process to try to introduce many of you that are sitting on the meeting tonight to try to get you to sign on the dotted line and say, yes, I'll be a volunteer.
Oh, okay, cool. So,
Yes.
I mean, so for those of us who are interested and want the training, how long is the training? What does the training involve? So forth, so on.
Tammy, I think you can take that one.
Yes, yes. So Indira, in April, there will be a briefing. Actually, these are the exact slides for the briefing in April for those who are interested in becoming a crisis intervention chaplain. Subsequent to this briefing will be quarterly trainings. And so each training will not surpass an hour, and we will release the schedule of what the training will encompass. So the subjects, the topics, and the dates. At this time, that is not complete, but we will have that perceivably by the April meeting.
The assumption is that all of you sitting on this meeting are well qualified to be crisis intervention chaplains. There's just absolutely no doubt in anybody's mind. Neither was there doubt in Bishop Ming's mind. That's why he mandated us to take this very worthy project. What we're going to be providing is probably updates to trainings that you've already had, or short vignettes to try to give you assistance. But again, in heart of hearts, I know every single one of you are well qualified to be a blessing to the PCG family. And this is kind of to part of what we're trying to do is give back to PCG. As chaplains, we're giving a gift to the fellow ministers that have gone before us and those that are serving alongside of us in a different role. We want the chaplains to be known as part of the team.
Yes. Are there any more questions on the confidentiality policy? If not, we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Elder Dale. We have discussed the roles, the responsibilities of the crisis intervention chaplains. And now we're going to talk about the responsibilities of the crisis intervention director. Currently, I am the crisis intervention director, but in the future, one of you could become the director. But here are the responsibilities. And so the crisis intervention director will oversee the plan and assign areas of coverage. Again, that's going to be with collaborating with each chaplain to see if they're available and willing to perform duties of CIC. But the crisis intervention director will assign areas of coverage, and we want to make sure that the crisis intervention director hosts the virtual quarterly meetings and training. And at the meetings, that person will discuss crisis trends and welcome you to share best practices. And so as this plan is actually carried out, we will each discover some best practices, and we will each be able to discuss our experiences and what's not working as well. And so those meetings with the crisis intervention chaplains will be a time to talk about what's working well, what are some lessons learned, and what do we need to improve. And so we in a way, we'll be mentoring each other about how to best carry out intervention. And then the training will be offered and will be relative to this plan, the crisis intervention plan, and the crisis intervention chaplain role. And the crisis intervention director will receive and maintain the crisis intervention contact reports. We're going to go over more about that in a few minutes. But additionally, the crisis intervention director will be assigned. So as the crisis intervention director, I will also serve as a crisis intervention chaplain. And so I am assigned to, I believe, 3 districts. And Texas is a huge state. But I will also do that work and report issues or the need for additional support to the Chaplains Commission endorser. So I report directly to Bishop Reynolds. So that's all I have for this slide, unless you have anything to add, sir.
No, we're good.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so one might ask, how do we start this process? How is the crisis intervention initiated? So the crisis intervention is initiated when a crisis intervention chaplain is contacted and dispatched by the crisis intervention director or a district leader or a pastor. So as a crisis intervention director, I might not be the first one to reach out to one of the crisis intervention chaplains. It could be a district leader or pastors, but the individual suffering a crisis may also learn who you are, and they should know who you are, and decide to reach out to you directly. And that is perfectly fine. But if you receive a notification, and when I say you, I mean the crisis intervention chaplain, as that person receives a notification for intervention by someone other than the director, it will be the crisis intervention chaplain's responsibility to inform the director. Part of this process is we want to make sure that we document that the crisis is receiving the attention according to this plan. And so, and also not just the attention, but follow-up. And so one way to do that if the crisis intervention chaplain is contacted by anyone other than the director, that person should reach out to the director and say, hey, I received this request for intervention. Just want to let you know I got it covered. And also, so this will make the crisis intervention director aware of the issue for tracking purposes. And then after the crisis intervention chaplain receives the request for intervention, within 24 hours, that person must submit a crisis intervention contact report to the director via email. And I'll show you what that looks like here shortly. But follow-up interventions will be reported on the same form and resubmitted within 24 hours after the subsequent encounter. And if you, as a crisis intervention chaplain, are unable to respond to a notification due to your schedule, because sometimes we aren't always able to respond, please let the director or myself know immediately so that I can identify another chaplain who can perform the intervention. So we're going to go over a flow chart here shortly so you can see the process summarized. But next slide, please. I also want to stress that if intervention is beyond our scope of responsibility and credentialing, then we must refer individuals to external professional services for legal reasons and to ensure the individuals can receive the help they really need. And there is an appendix within the plan that has some of those external resources by state. So that's a good start for us. Next slide. And so the crisis intervention can be conducted in a variety of ways, either in person, via telephone, or virtually via Zoom or another conference platform. The individuals in need of the intervention must agree to the mode of communication with the crisis intervention chaplain. PCG will not reimburse for services are required for using personal phones, computers, social media, or conference platforms. However, if the crisis intervention chaplain is near a PCG church or PCG facility where they need to use some resources, that may be available, that could be available. But reimbursement for travel to locations may be possible according to the reimbursement policy, and we'll go over that briefly here in a second. Are there any questions so far? If not, next slide. Here's the reimbursement policy. And so I'm not going to read this, but it's in the crisis intervention plan. And so I just say take the time to read it carefully should you need to submit a request for reimbursement. And I also want to highlight that if any of us on this call, and I think most of us are, but if at any point that a commission member is not a crisis intervention chaplain, this information is still good to know to be able to assist as needed, or if someone have a question for you. I know some of us serve as mentors to the chaplains who will be crisis intervention chaplains. And so it's just good to read as a commission member to know what the plan entails. Next slide. Here is the crisis intervention process mapping. And so it shows clearly how this goes. And so we have the crisis intervention director, a district leader or pastor. And I also want to add a person in need. We could also consider those four individuals as the people who may reach out to the crisis intervention chaplain directly. And so after the crisis intervention chaplain is contacted, then the crisis intervention chaplain, I'm sorry, let me start over. I had to maximize my screen. So after the crisis intervention chaplain is contacted by phone, email, or the PCG website request function, then that crisis intervention chaplain contacts the person in crisis immediately, or within 4 hours. That's a good response time. For example, if someone's at work, you know, if you're out in the field or whatever the case may be, it may not be possible to reach out with immediately within 5 or 10 minutes, but within 4 hours, we deem that's a good amount of time. But then after contacting that person in crisis, then conduct the care, and then be sure to contact the crisis intervention director within 4 hours. And that's especially if I'm not the person who initiated the request, or the care who contacted you directly stating that someone was in need, then let me know so I can start tracking that. And so also I know that care has been initiated. And then after that, the crisis intervention chaplain will submit the initial crisis intervention contact report to the director within 24 hours, and a spiritual assessment if necessary. And so as a VA chaplain, we conduct spiritual assessments with veterans on a daily basis. And I know the value of a spiritual assessment. It can direct care, and it can also remind the chaplain that certain care will be inevitable spiritual care. And it also helps us to assess the person's faith, you know, to see, and also if they're, ask them if they're suicidal, those kinds of things. But we'll go over that briefly as well. But that crisis intervention chaplain submits that CICR within 24 hours. And then lastly, continue care and refer to appropriate professionals in the community if necessary. Okay.
So
And yes, sir.
Chaplain Indy asked a question, is there a template that PCG has for an assessment? And I don't think PCG does, but Tammy, did you provide one for us? I'm not sure.
Yeah, yes, sir. There's a template in the plan,
Okay,
and and it's in this presentation as well, sir.
okay. And then also I wanted to just piggyback, just to give a little bit of background again. In November of 2024, this plan was presented to the General Council, which are the 6 general assistants to Bishop Ming, and they overwhelmingly approved the plan, and they were excited about it. The very next day, the plan was presented to the General Board, which is the bishops of all the 35 districts, and they too were very excited about it, very encouraged about it. It has not been publicly released to the districts because we asked the bishops to allow us to get the final legal review, number one, which we have done. And number two, then our plan was to train the identified chaplains between April, May, and the General Assembly, which takes place in June. And in June, then we will roll this out to the entire constituency, so that is when it will formally begin to take process.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bishop. If there are no questions, we can go to the next slide.
Just a comment of the
Yes,
last
yes, sir.
slide. Yeah, the last slide. The mapping, I like the mapping for the crisis intervention. Implied in that, in the very last step there, is continuation of care, the warm handoff there, and referring as appropriate. I guess is the assumption is within the crisis intervention. It's not expected to be a long-term care, because we are trying to find resources that are close to the individuals and to the persons. So having those lists of how they can be supported is going to be very important at the local level.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Chaplain Q. That's important, and that's really the purpose for this, is to because a crisis, as we know, has extenuating circumstances that could go on for quite some time. If there are no more questions and comments on the slide,
Tammy,
thank
I
you.
have a question as well.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. If a CIC is contacted directly from the district, can they respond immediately and then contact the CID within 4 hours? Or should we just say, hey, let me contact the CID first and then I'll get back to you?
Yeah, yes, sir. It can go both ways. I'll give an example. And so if I am a leader in the district, I could have a member of the church who requests, who says I'm having a crisis and I want to speak to a crisis intervention chaplain. Well, that person may not want to share with me as a leader what it's about. And so they may want to have the crisis intervention chaplain contacted immediately. And it is my assumption that we'll see situations where when we're contacted, it could be because either that person doesn't want to talk to his or her pastor about some things. And so otherwise there'll be times when we're not needed because they have that relationship with the pastor. They want to speak to the pastor about what's going on. But contacting us does not mean there is no trust either. It just will be up to that person who's in need. So your question is very relevant, sir, and I hope I answered it.
Okay, thanks. I think you said, go ahead, take care of them and then follow up with you later.
Yes. Follow up with me later, and it could be a text message. Hey, I just received this. I'll reach out to you later,
Okay.
and go from
Okay.
there. Yes.
Thank-
Yes, and please let me know as we're going over this, if something sticks out and because we all are professionals and experts here. Send an email, be sure to CC Bishop Reynolds. And so we may need to go back and add a note here and there. And that's fine. Yes, sir. Thank you. I do want to add that Chaplain Foster is the first person who has conducted this, gone through this process. And so, did you want to take a moment to speak to the flow of this? How was it for you, Chaplain Foster?
I think it's been going great. I think only thing I would include at this point, I guess, is that relationships matter, and if you are connected with a district specifically or at the annual conventions, it is important to make contacts and get connected with folks so that they feel comfortable to coming to you or reaching out to you. I think that's been huge, even if it's just I saw the chaplains at the table, or I spoke to them, or whatever. People are watching us, and if they know we're out there and we're a great resource to them, then I think they'll take advantage of this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your experience.
You bet.
Next slide, please. Yes. So this is not a CCIR report. This is a CICR and the Crisis Intervention Contact Report. Military chaplains get that joke. It was a corny one, but so notice that this Crisis Intervention Contact Report has a field for the initials of the individual receiving care. If the physical address, such as the individual's address, is not necessary to capture, then just add the location of the intervention. It could be a city, state, or, whatever you deem is best, given the situation. For example, I'm in Houston, outside of Houston, Katy, but if I have to report, then it may be necessary to just list Houston. We want to make sure that as we're conducting care that we try our very best to refrain from sharing any personal identifying information. And so like the home address. But the physical address may be necessary if we need to contact a first responder, if there's a domestic violence situation, for example. So the police, ambulance, and fire department may need to be contacted. But remember, it will be the crisis intervention chaplain's responsibility, and we're going to try to get all that as we continue, but to know what their state says about who we need to contact in what situation. That's what the confidentiality policy states, because there are states, some states have different rules about that. In addition to a summary of the crisis, please add the resolutions and any referrals made to the person in crisis. As you see, up to 3 follow-up sessions can be added to the same form. So you just update it and send the same form in. Just remember to resubmit the form within 24 hours to the Crisis Intervention Director after subsequent care. There's probably a question on this form. So are there any questions? Okay, if no questions, next slide. And I mentioned this already, but this is how the annual crisis intervention chaplain schedule looks. So for the training, one of the goals is to consult and reach out to professionals who can provide training, and I'll be the facilitator of the training, but they provide the training that can be helpful to us, and may lead to some supplementary licensure of sorts. As a VA chaplain, I know a lot of people who are certified to provide training that could give us additional certifications. All right. So again, I'm working on that schedule and that training, trying to make sure that we're not wasting your time, because we're all professionals here, that we're able to, whatever training we receive that's given to us, we're able to apply it. We are I don't know who has less years here or less experience, but we're pretty much in this thing, in the chaplaincy. And so we have a lot of experiences to draw from, but the important thing is that the training we receive is relevant and training that we can use, and potentially that we do not already have. So I hope that makes sense, and that lets you know that we are here not to waste your time, but to make sure that the training is quality training and not necessarily given by any of us. So we are seeking individuals in the field to come in who can provide us training we may not already have. Are there any questions?
No question, but just to follow up.
Yes, sir.
We've also discussed when we do the training that there could be the possibility of continuing education credits being assigned for those that are receiving training.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bishop, for reminding me on that, because I know that as a reserve chaplain, there are a lot of reserve chaplains that I am aware who have board certifications, especially those who are working at in a hospital setting. So so with all board certifications, you have to have continuing education units to keep your board certification annually. And so that is important to know, that the training we receive, we are going to make sure it's assessed properly for continuing education units.
I had a question in reference
Yes.
to it. So it says meetings and trainings. Is that going to be on the same day, or are those 2 separate days?
So it could be the same day. So the meetings will not be designed to be a very long meeting, right? So ideally, the meetings could be, 30 minutes, so even though we have the training, we may touch basis on where you are, if there are any questions, and then we go into our quarterly training. So when we have our quarterly training, the emphasis will be on that.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer your question, dear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and then again, by April, the meeting in April, we will have a more defined schedule based on what trainings will be conducted. And so it'll be spelled out a little more in depth. Okay, next slide. Here is the PCG spiritual assessment template. It is a best practice. Like I said, in the VA, we use spiritual assessments daily, but it is a best practice to offer a spiritual assessment to persons being helped to determine the impact of their crisis on their faith and morale, as opposed to making assumptions as caregivers. But asking individuals the questions on this form may also help them to focus on God in their situations and a biblical context, which they can relate to in the moment. Ideally, the spiritual assessment should be completed first, if possible, or certainly at the appropriate time. So we ask the questions and complete the form for the person being helped, and as the person may not be able to write at that time. So this is the spiritual assessment template. Are there any questions?
Just a quick comment on this spiritual assessment. I would
Yes.
assume that in the initial impact of the crisis, we may not get long answers or because of the impact, the denial and all that. But I think in the follow-ups, the second and the third, we can start getting some more information. Maybe number one, may be easier to check, but as far as details, we shouldn't be surprised if we don't get as much. And even when we ask questions, some people may respond in full, but some may be like, it may be a blank at that particular time.
Yes. Thanks for mentioning that, Chaplain Kihu, because this is a tool for the person in need of help, so that we address their needs and know how to also speak the word of God into their lives, right? Because so this is a document that can be filled out over time or completed over time. In fact, at the VA, we have what's called subsequent spiritual assessments. And so we complete the initial spiritual assessment, and then, maybe visit visit 2 or 3, then we add to it. And so, so this should be viewed as a snapshot of the individual that we're helping, based on what their needs are and how they're doing with their faith. So I hope that's clear. But if there are any questions, please ask them. There is a little bit on page 2. If we can go to the next slide. I'm almost done here, everyone. So the last question on the spiritual assessment gives an opportunity for individuals to confirm who they want to offer care, like the crisis intervention chaplain or their pastor or no one. Because if the pastor says, or district leader says that, I have a person in my church who's in a crisis, I want to just reach out to you all. Without talking to that person, they may say, we don't want the help, or we don't need, and that's perfectly their right. We want to be accessible and helpful, but we cannot force help on people. So that concludes the spiritual assessment portion. Are there any questions? If not, next slide. And we're on slide 16. Here are the PCG districts. And so some of you on this call have been assigned to 2 or 3 of these districts. And there's a page 2 with more districts. Chaplain Deere, you have a question?
Yeah, I was trying to write it because I didn't want to interrupt you too much.
Yeah,
But it was
yeah.
just about the spiritual assessment template. So that template is specific to PCG, um, just PCG, not outside of PCG.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, Chaplain Dira, and as my fellow VA chaplain, we know that our VA spiritual assessments look a lot different because we are in a pluralistic environment in that
Right.
hospital, but PCG, we are dealing mostly with people with whom we share faith.
Amen. Okay.
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. And so there are the 35 PCG districts, and this is page 2. Next slide. So this is the template we will use during quarterly crisis intervention chaplain meetings. And again, when the emphasis is on training, then we'll focus more on that. But there will be a slide for each district you serve, and the title heading at the top will match that district's official name. Any questions on this slide?
What is that one for again?
This is for to capture then this is just a template. So to capture, let's just say we're meeting in February. Okay, so this is to capture the crisis interventions you performed in January, the top 3 intervention trends and the organizations used for referral. So this is basically to not lose the information that we can draw lessons learned from, and also what's working and where we need to improve. So that's what this is for. And whether we go over these slides at the meeting or not, we'll still have them and in our folder to refer to when we need to. So this is basically just to capture the work that we're doing.
Tammy, just a suggestion, but maybe,
Yes, sir.
I mean, it sounds like you're building the slide around the districts, but you could also build it around the CIC. So
Yes,
that,
sir.
you know, if there's 15 of us that are meeting, you only have
Yes.
15 slides in, and we brief on any interactions we had with in any of the districts that were assigned,
Yes, sir.
might
Got it.
speed the process rather than
Yes, sir.
going through slides that aren't needed.
Yes, sir. That's great. That is what we call in civilian sector lean management. So thank you, Chaplain Foster. I've made a note on that, and then and I'll go back. That makes a lot of sense. I'll go back and rework this slide. Is that okay, Bishop?
Well, absolutely.
Yes, yes. That will save time and okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chaplain Foster. Okay. All right, next slide. If there are no more questions on that. We're on slide 19, one more to go. So the projected launch date for the crisis intervention plan is at the 2025 General Assembly Conference in Arizona. I will not be there, but I've talked to Bishop, and if there's a need to discuss, to either present the slides again or whatever Bishop has for me to do, I may be able to Zoom in. I may be able to join virtually somehow. And last slide, please. Are there any questions?
The question that keeps coming up in my head, I guess, is about any type of conflict of interest. I
Yes.
don't know if there's anything that would be considered a conflict of interest while performing as a CIC, within the given parameters of our jobs versus something in our personal lives. Some of those, some people, I know I don't do it right now, but in the past, like I had my own pastoral care and counseling business, if you will, trying to offer that as ministry in the community. So would there be any areas of conflict where we would like, okay, we want to distinguish a complete segregation, if you will, so that there's no conflicts of interest? I guess that's where I'm getting at. I don't know if I made sense with that.
Bishop may want to chime in on this, but so one thing to remember is that we are, within this plan, we are, dispatched by PCG. And so in essence, we're working for PCG. And so, so it is just the, various work ethics. I would say it is my inclination to say that if it's like private businesses or anything that is individually based, that to try as much as possible not to incorporate that part, because this plan, we are our protection for the work that we're doing with PCG is within this plan. Did I explain that well enough, Bishop? You want to chime in?
Yeah, the only thing I was thinking, thanks, Tammy, is if any chaplain is called upon and they do feel that there is any type of conflict of interest, whether it be somebody personally related to you, somebody that you work with, or somebody knows, you know if you feel that there is the slightest bit of conflict of interest, all that you would need to do then is to contact Tammy, and then we would just reassign another chaplain to the situation.
Yes, yes, sir. We certainly want to listen closely to what the person we're helping is saying. So something we may deem as not a conflict of interest, it might be for them. For example, if there's a domestic situation and we have developed a relationship, a cordial relationship with one of the individuals in that situation, the person who's requesting help may see that as a conflict of interest, because they say, well, you're a good friend of my spouse, and the issue is with my spouse, so I prefer another crisis intervention chaplain. So that's another example. But that's all I have, unless there's any questions, Bishop. That completes this